They say every generation does better than the one before it, that progress is automatic, that time heals what parents never had the chance to face. But what if progress sometimes looks like silence? What if strength in one generation was simply the ability to endure without collapsing? Generation X was raised in the space between analog and digital, between discipline and distance, between figure it out and don't talk about it. They grew up with house keys around their necks and emotions tucked deep in their pockets. And now they are parents. Parents who love fiercely. Parents who worry quietly. Parents who learned independence before they learned intimacy. What happens when a generation taught to survive is suddenly asked to emotionally attune? What hidden patterns echo in their homes, not from cruelty, but from conditioning? This is not a story of blame. It is a quiet exploration of inheritance. Let's begin. There was a time when childhood meant coming home to an empty house, a key around your neck, a microwave dinner, the quiet hum of the television filling the silence. Generation X became known as the latchkey kids, but that phrase sounds almost charming now, almost nostalgic. It doesn't capture the deeper imprint, the way independence was not a personality trait, but a requirement. They learned early that adults were busy, that emotions were private, that boredom was solved alone. No one asked, "How did that make you feel?" The question rarely existed. This wasn't cruelty, it was context. Many of their parents were navigating economic shifts, rising divorce rates, cultural transitions. Survival was practical, feelings were secondary. So children adapted. The nervous system, when left to regulate itself too early, becomes efficient, hyper-aware, self-soothing, alert to subtle changes in environment. You learned how to read a room before you learned how to name what was happening inside you. And when you were praised for being mature for your age, something complicated happens. You stop needing, or at least you stop showing it. This is the blueprint many Gen X parents carry into adulthood, not consciously, but cellularly. Independence feels safe. Self-sufficiency feels responsible. Asking for help feels excessive. And now they are raising children in a world that asks for something different. Children are encouraged to express, to articulate, to process. Schools teach emotional vocabulary that their parents never heard growing up. Words like boundaries, triggers, validation. It can feel foreign. There is love, deep, protective love, but there may also be confusion. Why does everything need to be discussed? Why is discomfort something to be analyzed instead of endured? The child of yesterday became the parent of today, but the nervous system still remembers the empty house. It remembers solving problems alone. It remembers crying quietly. It remembers pride in not needing anyone. And so sometimes, without meaning to, that same expectation is passed down, not as neglect, not as indifference, but as normal. Figure it out. You'll be fine. You're strong. Strength was the currency of their childhood. But what if strength for this generation of children also includes softness? What if independence and intimacy were never meant to compete? This is where the blueprint begins to tremble, not with blame, but with awareness. Because patterns are not destiny, they are simply maps drawn by experience, and maps can be revised. Love was never absent. It was simply quiet. In many Gen X households, affection was practical. It showed up as packed lunches, as rides to practice, as long hours worked without complaint. Love looked like provision, protection, presence in the physical sense. But rarely did it sound like, "I'm proud of you," or "I love you" spoken casually without occasion. Emotion in their childhood homes often felt like something reserved for extremes: grief, anger, crisis, not everyday warmth, not ordinary reassurance. So they learned that love is demonstrated, not declared. And now, as parents, that belief lingers. You may cook every meal, attend every event, stay awake worrying about their future, and still feels strangely uncomfortable saying the words out loud. Why? Because for many Gen X parents, verbal affection feels vulnerable in a way that productivity never did. Doing is safe. Speaking the heart feels exposed. There is also an inherited stoicism, a quiet agreement that composure equals competence. If you are too expressive, you are unstable. If you are too emotional, you lose authority. So love becomes structured, contained, implied. But children today are growing up in a culture that names everything. They are taught to identify emotions, to expect validation, to ask for reassurance. Their language is emotional fluency. And sometimes this creates friction. A child may say, "You never tell me you're proud of me." And inside, something stirs, confusion, maybe even hurt. Never? You sacrificed, you showed up, you worried constantly. How could that not translate? The misunderstanding is subtle but profound. One generation learned that love is proven through endurance. The next learns that love is felt through expression. Neither is wrong, but they speak different dialects. Psychologically, this reflects attachment conditioning. If affection in childhood was scarce or understated, the nervous system adapts by lowering its expectation. You stop reaching for reassurance because you assume it isn't necessary or available. But when raising children who openly seek connection, this adaptation can feel destabilizing. It asks you to revisit something you once survived by minimizing. To say "I love you" without a holiday attached, to apologize, to narrate your feelings in real time. This is not weakness, it is unfamiliar territory. And unfamiliar territory often triggers resistance. Not because the love isn't there, but because language was never the bridge. And yet, something begins to shift. Because when your child looks at you, waiting, not for provision but for presence, you may feel the quiet realization that love, when spoken, does not diminish strength. It deepens it. The silence that once protected you may not be necessary anymore. And that is both frightening and freeing.
Independence was never optional. It was earned early, reinforced often, praised consistently. You're so responsible. You don't need babysitting. You can handle it. At first, it felt empowering, but over time, independence stopped being something you did and became who you were. For many Gen X parents, self-reliance is not just a trait, it is armor, it is stability, it is proof that nothing, not divorce, not absence, not chaos, could break you. Psychologically, this adaptation has a name. When a child learns that emotional support is inconsistent or unavailable, the nervous system shifts towards self-sufficiency. Attachment theory would call it avoidant tendencies, not coldness, but protection. If no one reliably soothes you, you learn to soothe yourself. If vulnerability goes unanswered, you minimize it. If asking feels risky, you stop asking. And the world rewards this. Employers admire it. Partners depend on it. Friends lean on it. You become the steady one, the capable one, the calm one. But there is a quiet cost, because hyper-independence often masks a deeper belief. If I don't handle it, no one will. And when you become a parent, that belief intensifies. You take on more, you worry alone, you suppress exhaustion because collapse feels unacceptable. The child you once were had no choice but to be strong, but now that strength has fused with identity. Letting others help, even your own children emotionally, can feel destabilizing. There is another layer too. When your child struggles, something inside you may instinctively say, "You'll figure it out," not out of dismissal, but because that's how you survived. Struggle was formative, discomfort was instructive. But today's emotional culture encourages co-regulation, discussion, processing together, and this can feel foreign. If independence built your confidence, why would you interrupt your child's discomfort too quickly? If no one rushed to solve your loneliness and you turned out functional, what's the harm? The answer is not simple. Resilience and emotional connection are not opposites, but when independence is fused with identity, softness can feel like regression. You may pride yourself on not needing reassurance, on solving quietly, on enduring. Yet somewhere beneath that strength is a younger version of you, small, capable, alone, who never learned that needing someone could also be safe. This is the paradox. Hyper-independence created competence, but it also created distance, and parenting in this era asks for closeness. The blueprint says stand on your own, but the heart of your child says stand with me. And for the first time, independence is no longer the only measure of strength. Perhaps strength now includes something else, something shared, something spoken, something allowed.
They were the generation that roamed freely, riding bikes until the streetlights flickered on, drinking from garden hoses, knocking on doors without texting first. No GPS, no constant updates, no digital footprints. Freedom was assumed. Risk was normalized. And yet, now they are parents in a world where danger feels amplified, broadcast, archived, commented on in real time. News cycles never sleep. Social media magnifies fear. Every mistake can be recorded, replayed, judged. Something shifts inside. The same parent who once wandered unsupervised may now track their child's location. The same person who solved problems alone may hesitate to let their child struggle without intervention. Why? Because the world feels louder. But beneath the noise is something deeper, a quiet collision between memory and reality. Your childhood taught you that freedom builds competence, that scraped knees and wrong turns are part of growth. You survived without constant monitoring. You learned resourcefulness because no one hovered. So you want to give that same autonomy. And yet, when your child steps outside, a different voice whispers, "What if something happens? What if this world is not the one you grew up in?" This tension lives in the nervous system. On one side, pride in resilience. On the other, anxiety fueled by visibility. Gen X parents often stand in this invisible crossroads, valuing independence while fearing consequences they never had to imagine. The internet did not document your adolescence. Mistakes faded into memory. Today, they linger online. So control becomes tempting. Not strictness, not domination, but subtle overprotection. Checking, monitoring, advising more than necessary. And sometimes it confuses the child. Why don't you trust me? But it is not mistrust, it is hyper-awareness. A world that once felt contained now feels borderless. Psychologically, this is cognitive dissonance, holding two truths at once. Freedom created you, but safety feels fragile. The conflict can be exhausting. You don't want to raise a fearful child, but you don't want to ignore risk. So you oscillate. One day, go figure it out. The next, text me every hour. This inconsistency is not hypocrisy, it is adaptation under pressure. Because you are parenting across eras. You remember anonymity. They live in exposure. You remember physical risk. They navigate digital vulnerability. And somewhere between those worlds, you are trying to recalibrate. To offer freedom without abandonment. To offer safety without suffocation. The balance is delicate. But the very fact that you question it means the blueprint is evolving. It doesn't shout. It lingers. It shows up in the quiet moments, after an argument, after a long day at work, after your child closes their bedroom door a little too firmly. And it asks a simple question. Am I repeating something I once promised I wouldn't? Many Gen X parents grew up watching absence in different forms. Emotional distance, physical distance, exhausted caregivers who carried too much. You told yourself, silently, I'll be different. And in many ways, you are. You show up. You try to listen. You question your reactions. But then life intervenes. Bills demand attention. Careers stretch long. Fatigue settles into the bones. And sometimes, in moments of stress, an old tone slips out. sharp, dismissive, impatient. It can feel like betrayal, because deep down there is a vow you made as a child. I won't become that. Psychologically, this is the weight of generational awareness. You see the patterns clearly now. You can name them. You understand emotional neglect, attachment wounds, trauma responses. The language exists, and awareness changes everything. Your parents may not have had the vocabulary to critique themselves, but you do, and with vocabulary comes scrutiny. You analyze your tone, you replay conversations, you wonder if one wrong response will echo for decades. There is also another layer of guilt, the economic reality. Many Gen X parents balance careers in a demanding, transitional economy. Work became security, stability meant survival, so long hours felt responsible. But today's culture emphasizes presence, emotional attunement, mindful parenting. And sometimes you sit between those expectations, feeling inadequate in both worlds. If you work too much, you feel absent. If you scale back, you feel anxious about security. This silent guilt is rarely discussed openly, because you are still the strong one, the capable one, the one who handles things. Admitting guilt can feel like weakness. But guilt in this context is not evidence of failure. It is evidence of care. You would not worry about repeating patterns if you were indifferent. You would not question yourself if you did not love deeply. The irony is profound. The very self-reflection you engage in, the constant questioning, the desire to do better, is already a break from the past. You are not parenting unconsciously. You are parenting while looking inward. And that is heavy work. Sometimes the child inside you whispers, "You survived. That was enough." But the parent inside you whispers, "I want more than survival for them." This tension creates the quiet ache, not because you are failing, but because you are evolving. And evolution is rarely comfortable. Change rarely arrives dramatically. It does not always announce itself with a grand decision or a perfectly articulated promise. Sometimes it arrives in a pause, in the split second before you respond the way you were once spoken to. Your child says something vulnerable, or angry, or painfully honest, and you feel two impulses rise at once. The first is familiar, automatic, efficient. Stop overreacting. You'll be fine. That's not a big deal. The second is slower, quieter. It asks you to stay, to listen longer than feels comfortable, to ask a follow-up question, to resist the urge to fix. This moment, this fragile hesitation, is where generational patterns begin to fracture. Not because you are erasing your childhood, but because you are choosing not to replicate it blindly. For many Gen X parents, breaking what was normal feels disorienting. The old ways worked. They created resilience. They produced competence. Why dismantle something that functioned? But functioning and flourishing are not identical. You survived emotional distance. Your child may not have to. And here is the paradox. Breaking patterns often feels like betraying loyalty. There is love for your own parents, understanding of their circumstances. You know they did what they could with what they had. So when you choose to parent differently, it can feel like silent criticism, as if doing more emotionally implies they did less. This internal conflict can be heavy. But evolution is not condemnation. It is continuation with awareness. Psychologically, this is the shift from unconscious inheritance to conscious integration. You are no longer operating solely from reflex. You are observing yourself in real time. You might say, "I'm sorry," words rarely spoken to you. You might explain your feelings instead of shutting down. You might admit uncertainty instead of performing authority. These moments may feel small, but to a child, they are tectonic. Because what changes a lineage is not dramatic rebellion. It is consistent micro-shifts, a softer tone, a longer hug, a willingness to revisit a conversation. You are not abandoning strength, you are expanding it. Strength once meant endurance. Now it includes vulnerability. And vulnerability, for someone raised to handle everything alone, can feel like stepping onto unfamiliar ground without armor. Yet something unexpected happens. Instead of losing authority, you gain trust. Instead of weakening the bond, you deepen it. The blueprint does not disappear overnight. It lives in muscle memory, in stress responses, in tired evenings. But awareness interrupts inevitability. And every time you choose presence over reflex, you quietly rewrite what normal means in your home. Not perfectly, not flawlessly, but intentionally. And intention across generations is transformative. There is a quiet misconception that healing requires rejection, that to grow you must disown where you came from, that softness must replace strength, that vulnerability must erase stoicism. But integration is not erasure, it is expansion. Gen X parents carry something rare: adaptability. They have lived through analog childhoods and digital adulthood, through economic uncertainty, cultural shifts, and technological revolutions. Reinvention is not foreign to them. And now that same adaptability turns inward. The goal is not to abandon independence, it is to hold it alongside connection. You can still value resilience and teach emotional language. You can still encourage self-reliance and offer reassurance. These are not contradictions, they are complements. Psychologically, integration occurs when old survival strategies are no longer used automatically, but consciously. Hyper-independence becomes healthy autonomy. Emotional restraint becomes thoughtful regulation instead of suppression. The difference is awareness. You may notice when you shut down. You may catch yourself minimizing feelings, and instead of judging yourself, you pause. Because self-compassion is part of this evolution too. It is easy to scrutinize your parenting under modern standards, to compare yourself to curated online portrayals of presence and patience. But growth is not measured by perfection. It is measured by responsiveness. When your child approaches you with something difficult and you stay, even if awkwardly, that is integration. When you admit, "I didn't handle that well," that is integration. When you allow yourself to need rest, help, reassurance, that is integration. There is also something deeply powerful happening beneath the surface. Your child witnesses you learning, not collapsing under change, not rigidly resisting it, but adjusting. This models something profound. Strength does not mean immobility, it means flexibility under pressure. The empty house of your childhood taught you endurance. Your present home can teach emotional fluency. One does not cancel the other. You are not required to become a different person to parent differently. You are simply allowing more of yourself to exist. The capable one, the steady one, and the emotionally present one. Perhaps this is the true legacy of Generation X. Not detachment, not distance, but evolution. A willingness to question what once felt unquestionable. A willingness to soften without dissolving. Strength with softness. And in that balance, something heals, not only for your child, but for the younger version of you who once navigated an empty house alone. Legacy is rarely loud. It is not only in the traditions you keep or the rules you enforce. It lives in subtler places. In the tone you choose when you could have raised your voice. In the apology you offer when you could have stayed silent. In the moment you decide to listen instead of dismiss. Generation X parents often wonder what they are truly passing down. Will their children remember the distance or the devotion? But legacy is not a single memory. It is emotional atmosphere. You pass down resilience, not as pressure, but as proof that difficulty can be survived. You pass down adaptability, the quiet confidence that change does not have to destroy you. You pass down perspective, the understanding that the world shifts and humans can shift with it. And now you are adding something new: emotional presence. Not perfectly, not constantly, but intentionally. The child who once learned to self-soothe in an empty room is now creating a home where feelings can be spoken aloud. The generation that internalized "don't make a fuss" is slowly normalizing conversation. This is not small. It is generational recalibration. You may still carry moments of silence, days when exhaustion wins, reactions that echo your past, but patterns do not define legacy. Direction does. And the direction is changing. There is something deeply poetic about this transition. The same independence that once protected you now gives you the courage to question yourself. The same resilience that helped you endure now helps you adapt. You are not erasing your upbringing. You are refining it. Perhaps your children will grow up remembering two things at once: that they were encouraged to stand on their own, and that someone was there when they needed to lean. That balance between autonomy and attunement may be the true inheritance. Not perfection, not constant emotional fluency, but growth in motion. And maybe one day when they reflect on you, they won't describe you as distant or strict or stoic. They will describe you as steady, as evolving, as someone who tried. And sometimes trying, consciously, reflectively, imperfectly, is the deepest form of love. If parts of this reflection felt familiar, if something quiet inside you was touched, you are not alone. There are many parents navigating this invisible bridge between endurance and emotional expression. Many who grew up strong and are now learning how to be strong and soft at the same time. There is no diagnosis here, no judgment, only recognition. If this space feels like somewhere you can breathe, if you'd like to stay connected to conversations about the hidden patterns we carry and the quiet ways we evolve, you're welcome here. This channel is not just content, it is a place to explore the unspoken layers of the human heart. And if you feel comfortable sharing, you can leave a comment about what resonated, not because you have to, but because your words might help someone else feel less alone in their own reflection. Take care of yourself.